Hello, and welcome back to our sessions talking about getting behind the middle school mind. And the next thing that we're going to talk about is social emotional development of middle school and early adolescence. And we're really going to hopefully give you guys a framework today for a social emotional coaching process, which is designed to really build the resilience of kids at the middle school age with regard to social emotional development and with regard to social emotional competence. And so we'll dive right in and hopefully give you guys some strategies that are going to help your students navigate this very tricky time in development. All right. So I'm basing this on a book that I've written called Walking the Wire, which is actually a book for students and for teachers to use as kind of a teaching tool. But what I'm going to do is present it from the teaching angle so that you guys kind of get the steps that are involved that you can either use in conjunction with the book Walk the Wire, or you can use it just as a framework to guide your own interactions with students. So the book is actually for students, and the process, though, is something that you can use in conjunction with the book or independent of the book. So we're going to be talking about building social emotional competence through everyday social problem solving with students. So our objectives for this section of our training is to really understand the elements of what makes an adolescent social emotionally competent. We're going to talk about creating an environment that sets kids up for success and identify different ways that we can model positive and negative emotions and relationships and how to work through those. Helping kids know how to react and respond to everyday problems that are relevant to their age level, their social group, their environments in a way that really increases their confidence and their social emotional competence, and explain ways, hopefully I'm going to be giving you tools on how you can coach kids through strategies to demonstrate their social emotional competence and build their confidence in handling common everyday issues that arise in their life. So one thing that I want to remind everyone is that social emotional skills are just like academic skills in that not everybody is at the same readiness level. Depending on prior experiences, depending on maturity level, depending on support systems and structures, depending on background experience and models that they have in their life, different kids come to us at different places on the readiness continuum for social emotional competence, just like they do come to us at different math levels and different reading levels. So we need to remember, as we're helping build that competence with social emotional skills, that we need to keep kids in the Goldilocks zone, which means that what we're asking them to do is not too easy that it seems like baby stuff, because we know that middle school students do not like to be treated like babies, right? But also so that we're not asking them to do something that's beyond their capabilities so far that they're going to feel overwhelmed or frustrated or unable to succeed. So we just want to keep them in that just right instructional zone. I often, when I'm reminding people about what's called the zone of proximal development, is the official name for it, the Goldilocks zone, I always give the example of if you were going to teach me to run a marathon, you would have to work with me in a different way than you would have to work with my brother, who already runs 8 miles a day regularly. I don't run at all. So we are not going to be starting at the same point. You're going to have to do a lot more scaffolding with me to even know how to pace myself and how to build up the physical resilience to run a mile before I can run 24. My brother is going to be much quicker to gain those skills because he's got a lot of them already. So a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, a lot of knowing how much he can push himself. He's at a way different instructional level for learning how to run a marathon than me. And so you're not going to teach, a coach would not work with me the same way he would work with my brother. So we need to recognize that not all kids are at the same level social emotionally, and we may need to provide more support, more scaffolding, more guided practice, more encouragement, more reinforcement, more direct instruction to some kids than others. So, first of all, I just want to kind of walk through the different developmental levels of the different areas of social emotional development. So, when we talk about social emotional development for every one of the ages that we're going to go through, and I'm going to buzz through them fairly quickly, I'm not going to read the whole slide to you, so you can take a breath of relief if you're afraid of that. But we are going to see on every one of the next few slides that came from kittymatters.com, we're going to see the same categories on each slide. So we're going to see one on self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills. Those same categories are going to be on each of the next following slides, because we're going to just take a very quick trip through the different age levels and see how those skills develop. And I know you're working with middle school, so you're like, why are we starting at age 3? The reason we start at age 3 is because social emotional development typically goes in a fairly predictable order in terms of mastery of different skills, but it's not really a linear development. You're still working on many of these skills over an extended period of time, and especially depending on if you have a disability of some sort, if you have a lack of exposure to things, if you've got a lower socioeconomic status that has potentially impacted how many different experiences you've had, if you're from a situation that involves trauma, all of those things can impact your social emotional development. So I want you to see in general how those skills typically develop, so that you can understand that a student might be at a level maybe of a 7 or 8 year old in terms of social emotional skills, even though they're academically gifted or intellectually gifted. So social emotional development is kind of a nonlinear kind of development that is impacted by many things. So, but by age 3 or so, you're hoping that kids are learning to really express their emotions in more appropriate ways, talk about strong feelings and label feelings, becoming more independent and learning to understand that, my behavior has consequences, good and bad, and being able to talk in starting to identify feelings other than just angry, mad, sad, happy. So really starting to be able to express what they like and dislike, being able to ask for help when they need it, taking turns sharing, starting to look at other kids and copy their behavior, or look at adults and copy their behavior. So sometimes you'll see little ones at this age engage in imaginative play where they are kind of acting out what they are seeing happen around them from adults. So for instance, my granddaughter, who's about 4 actually, but she will sometimes be playing with her stuffed animals, and she will be saying things in the voice of one of the animals that sounds just like something her mom or her dad might say. So starting to take what they're seeing happen around them and apply it in kind of role play, and understanding that actions have consequences and that kind of thing. So as I'm saying that, some of you are probably going, yeah, I know 12 or 13-year-olds who don't do some of those things, who don't know how to express themselves adequately, who don't know, haven't yet started connecting that my behaviors have consequences. So bingo, not all kids are at the social emotional competence level that you would typically associate with their age, just like not all 3rd graders can read independently yet at the level you would expect them to. And not all 7th graders are at the same math level. So not all kids are at the same social emotional level either. And some of them might be significantly delayed and not be demonstrating behaviors that you would might maybe expect of a 3 or 4-year-old. So when you get to ages 5 or 6, you're really starting to expand a lot of those skills. So their emotional vocabulary is getting much more rich and expanded, and they can use words like frustrated or embarrassed, or things beyond just the basic happy, angry, sad. They are starting to notice differences between themselves and others, and maybe even identifying at the babysitter, there's a kid who doesn't behave very well, right? They might start to understand what it's like to be embarrassed and want to avoid embarrassment. They might be gaining a lot more sensitivity to other people's feelings and not wanting to hurt someone's feelings, or feeling sorry for someone, that's starting to develop at ages 5 and 6. So becoming a little less egocentric and starting to consider how other people feel, and also make connections between their own experiences and the experiences that other people are having. Understanding consequences and making choices is kind of a hallmark of ages 5 and 6, starting to accept other people might be different than me, wanting to be a pleaser starts to develop at 5 or 6, where they want to be accepted and want to have friends and make the adults around them happy. That's typically developing at ages 5 and 6. And again, that may not be the case for some kids who have not had the same social emotional development as others. At ages 7 and 8, we're really starting to get to the point where kids can go, okay, I can delay gratification. This is something that I want, but I can wait for it. I can uh, deal better with transition, stopping something that I want to do and being asked to do something I don't want to do. Understanding that they have things that they want or need, and maybe being able to describe themselves more in terms of external or behavioral characteristics. So being able to say what they like to do, what they're good at, what they're not good at, being able to be a little more abstract in how they talk about situations, and really starting to connect more with feeling compassion and understanding other people and thinking about how their actions impact others. Thinking about, I have two choices. What are the pros and cons of those two options, and being able to weigh two options to decide what to do. That's really starting to get a little more developed at ages 7 or 8. And being able to share opinions, resolve conflicts, understand that you don't agree with me and that that's okay. So that is hugely important in developing better self-management skills and acting in expected ways. And again, we have a lot of students these days who we seem to maybe be seeing not yet getting to this point by the age we would expect them to. So that's something that we're going to have to really fill some holes for some students who haven't had a lot of experiences or good modeling of those social emotional competencies. Around 9 or 10 is kind of the hallmark for when we think about kids developing better self-management. So this is where we are really expecting that most neurotypical kids who are from typical healthy circumstances would be able to start developing better self-control, being able to identify their emotions and understand that I feel this way. What are my options for how to handle it? And what are the pros and cons of those, and starting to make better choices about how to choose a good solution to a problem and express themselves appropriately. And they definitely are starting to develop a sense of fairness and justice at this age. So there might be a lot of questioning of what's fair and what's not fair, and being more interested in current events, social issues, starting to really respond to peer pressure and learning the expectations around how to do that appropriately, being able to seek out friends for help, and starting to develop like a more variegated friendship circle, that these are my best friends and these are just people I sometimes hang out with and these are just acquaintances. Up until this point, there really usually hasn't been a lot of distinction of that among kids. So at age 9 or 10, you're really starting to get into more nuanced understanding of emotions, of friendships, of choices, that kind of thing, and learning to think ahead about how I'm going to handle a situation. Again, we have a lot of kids who are developing these skills a little later than we would expect them to. And so at middle school age, you are definitely going to have some of your kids, when we talk about not all kids being in the same Goldilocks zone. Well, now we're getting into that 9-10 age bracket, which is fairly close to middle school. So you're definitely going to have some middle school students who are 11, 12, 13, who are still back in this stage of developing these skills that we've been talking about at the 9 and 10 age range. Now, 11 and 13, the golden years for middle school, we're talking about kids taking more responsibility for themselves, being able to manage their emotions, being able to cope with things like fear and rejection, starting to really figure out how I'm going to deal with the fact that I didn't get invited to the skating party that somebody had for their birthday. Being able to set their own goals and figure out how to manage their own homework and their chores and that kind of thing. At this age, kids are getting very sensitive to what others think about them, and they care a lot about where they fit into the social gamut, and they might be kind of struggling with who they are and how they fit in and belong, and really wanting to start defining themselves and knowing, I want to dye my hair purple, or I always wear these ripped up jeans, or I'm the one who always wears the funky Converse, or whatever it is that they've decided is going to be their hallmark. They tend to start developing some of those things to try to define themselves. And they're starting to really learn how to become aware of other people's views and compare them to what they think and question things and challenge things. They might be able to have a better understanding of actions and consequences, but they also might be challenging the results and really asking questions about fairness and justice, and why did I have to stay for detention and he didn't, and why do you always notice when I act up and you ignore it when they do. They're starting to really problem solve and develop close friendships with peers. And it's really important to them to have that sense of belonging. And they're probably going to seek their advice and their counsel more from their friends than they do from the adults around them. At 14 and 16, and I am going to go on into the next age levels so that you can kind of see where these skills are headed when the kids get just a little bit older. At 14 and 16, at the stage just past where you're working with them at middle school, they're becoming a lot more self-sufficient, a lot more independent, better able to organize themselves, better able to very eloquently express their feelings. They definitely know the difference between right and wrong, hopefully at this age, and that they're, more reflective, more insightful, more able to make more nuanced decisions and question authority, question things that are right or wrong. Social justice becomes a little more interesting to them. They want to explore beyond just their own little cocoon. And then hopefully all of our kids get to the point of being at 16 to 18, where really becoming a lot more emotionally stable, being more independent, taking more, being more self-advocates, being able to set goals and map out plans for attaining them, being able to have a more deep caring for others and an interest in the world beyond just their own little world, becoming a little less egocentric and becoming more assured of who they are and more comfortable in their own skin. So they're not constantly having to challenge and question and experiment as much. So that kind of gives you an idea of where your middle schoolers are fitting in that continuum of social emotional competence. Why is it so important that we understand that? Because social emotional learning is critical for your personal mental well-being, for school success in school, for building positive relationships, for being able to make good decisions that are going to keep you out of trouble and keep you on the path to happiness and peace and success, and help you manage things yourself, from your own emotions to the tasks that you're expected to do, to down the road, your career, your finances, your family, etc. So it's very important to start these conversations early and to keep them going. So I love the phrase that, and I did not make it up and I don't know who to credit with it, but I love the phrase that you have to Maslow before you can bloom. So those of you who remember Maslow's hierarchy, I'll just kind of focus on that side of the slide for now, and then we'll kind of move on to Bloom's taxonomy. So before we can expect kids to kind of work on and master these social emotional skills that we're talking about, we have to make sure that they are in that top triangle of Maslow, that they have their physiological needs met. Because if you're hungry, if you're thirsty, if you are not clothed appropriately and don't have a place to rest safely and be sheltered, your mind is not on increasing your social emotional skills. You don't have the capacity to divert your energies to thinking about that. You're in survival mode. The same kind of applies for that next rung up, which is your safety needs for security and safety. The next rung up being that sense of belonging and having intimate relationships and friends. The next rung up being a sense of prestige and feeling of accomplishment and knowing what you're good at and knowing that you're recognized for what you're good at. And then moving into that top triangle of self-actualization, where you're really in that zone for achieving your greatest potential and including your, pursuing your creative dreams and learning about yourself and setting your own goals and your own mastery of your life. So that's what we're hoping in social emotional learning, that we get kids to. In that process, we're going to always have to remember that social emotional learning is like any other skill that you're learning, whether it's reading or writing or science or social studies. It involves these levels of understanding on Bloom's taxonomy that we're all familiar with as educators, that we start out with just rote skills. We're hoping to move it to a place where we can really, truly understand and give examples and make sense of things, summarize things. But then we want eventually to be able to apply that knowledge in real life situations, in multiple different situations, and that then we can actually analyze a situation, understand it thoroughly, break it apart and rearrange it, and really thoroughly understand how the pieces fit together, evaluate a situation and make judgments about it, and then create our own circumstances, or use that information to really create something new. So those same things apply in social emotional learning. So we're really going to, as we talk about the process of teaching and coaching social emotional skills, we need to remember that there's that process of moving up Bloom's ladder for social emotional as well as for any academic skill. So what is SEL? What makes a person competent in social emotional skills? It's when we can understand emotions, we can manage our emotions, we can connect to others and relate to others and understand others' connections to us and their differences from us, maintain positive relationships and become aware and accepting of social norms. At the same time, we question what the best decisions are and make good decisions based on all of those skills that build up to being able to make good decisions. And we know that one of the biggest frustrations of working with kids at the middle school grades is they're not always great decision makers. They're oftentimes very much influenced by their emotions and more likely to not be able to control their impulses as well, and to react from an emotional perspective rather than maybe a logical perspective. Because as we talked in our last session, maybe the amygdala, the limbic system, is a little more sensitive and more easily triggered. And the executive function center that controls our impulses and helps us make good decisions is a little less well developed at middle school age. So the categories that we're going to always be talking about and referring back to as we talk about social emotional learning are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. And so we're going to look at each of those in a little more detail. So self-awareness involves being able to identify and then express a really wide, rich range of emotions beyond just angry, sad, happy. We want kids to have a wide vocabulary for being able to describe their feelings and be able to recognize them and notice them in different situations, because the first step to being able to manage your emotions and make good decisions is being aware of them and able to express them. So we want to introduce words like embarrassed, frustrated, excited, nervous, jittery, anxious, ticked off, a wide variety, because we want kids to recognize that emotions are on a continuum from, it's not just black and white, because then we can help kids understand that they have the ability to adjust their emotions when they recognize them. We want them to be able to express what they like and dislike. We want them to be able to recognize their strengths and talents, and also accept that they're not great at everything and that they might need help with something, and that you might have to do things that are hard for you and that aren't your best and most beloved activities. And that's okay, that we don't all have to be good at everything, but it's okay to be able to try something that you're going to struggle with and ask for help. So those are all aspects of self-awareness. Self-management really is the next step, which is to be able to recognize your feelings in a moment and then know your options for responding to the emotions. Know that recognizing the emotions is one step, and then deciding how to respond to them is a separate, different step. So a lot of kids who haven't achieved social emotional competence might be able to recognize their feeling, but they really haven't gotten to the point where they can control their emotions enough to make a decision about how to respond rather than to just react in the moment. So knowing options for how to respond in the moment to emotions and imagining ahead of time what the outcome of this reaction will be versus the outcome of this reaction, and then making an effective choice of how to respond. Social awareness is really understanding that we're not all the same. We have lots of things in common, but we also have things that make us unique and different. And that's the richness of relationships, and understanding that we have different relationships with different people, that there's a different relationship I have with my best friend than there is that I have with an acquaintance, or I have a different relationship with my parent than I do with my teacher. And that I have to adjust my interactions according to different relationship expectations. Awareness of how other people think and feel, and being able to notice it and respond appropriately to it, and recognizing that my actions will influence how others feel about me and interact with me. And just being aware that we all impact each other. That's the basis of social awareness. Relationship awareness is when you really take that then to the individual level and understand that we adjust our behavior to different relationships. We choose our behaviors to influence how others will feel about us. We appreciate that we have an impact on other people. And sometimes we even put other people's needs ahead of ours at times, especially if we love them and care about them. We apologize when we need to. We do kind things for other people. We go out of our way to offer help to someone who's struggling. That's relationship awareness. And responsible decision making is what we're hoping all of our students get to, is that ability to use your own feelings and your own experiences to inform your decisions, to think about multiple solutions to a single problem, think about potential consequences, seeing if this is something I need help, who could I turn to for help, and then choose effective strategies to deal with that situation that you've been handed. So the first aspect of coaching social emotional competence is that you want to create a good emotional climate for learning in your classroom. You want to personally greet students every day. And I know that's harder in the middle school environment, where you may have 6 or 7 sections a day, and that's a lot of kids to know something about to make a personal greeting. But it is really important, and it means a lot to kids, and it's establishing a climate that I'm important and my teacher knows who I am, cares about who I am. Giving behavior specific praise. So a lot of times we find ourselves saying the same things over and over. Good job, awesome, way to go. But praise has a lot more impact when you make it specific to what you're praising. Thank you so much for erasing the whiteboard for me. I didn't get to it last period. Thanks for doing that. I appreciate you guys getting in your seat. We have so much to cover today. So thank you for getting your seat and making our class go so smoothly. Telling the students what they did right. Encouraging a growth mindset. So helping kids recognize, and you can talk about things that are difficult for you, to show that it's okay not to be great at everything. And that whenever we say we can't do something, we should always add the word yet to the end of that sentence, because we're all growing and learning. Attention to positives, focusing more. We all know, probably have heard that rule, that it takes 7 positives to make up for 1 negative interaction that you have with someone. So making sure we give more attention to our positive interactions with kids than the negative or redirecting ones. Even things like positive notes and phone calls home, kids will act like it doesn't make any difference to them. But I can tell you right now the name of the teacher who called my mom to compliment me on being one of her favorite students to have in class, because I was always participating in discussions and had unique insights to share about the books we were reading in English class. That stuck with me. I can tell you right now as a parent that I remember the day I got an email from my son's middle school science teacher telling me, I just wanted to bring to your attention that your son is always the first to offer help to other kids. And that is really cool. And I really enjoy having him in class. That was huge to me because I don't get to see my son at school. So that has stuck with me for 10 years that I got that email. So those things really do matter. Frequent celebrations of what's going well and what kids are doing right are really important for establishing that emotional climate. So one of the most important things that you do in social emotional teaching or coaching is modeling good social emotional skills yourself, showing respectful concern for people, modeling a language for emotions by using emotional vocabulary yourself and talking about your own daily activities. Be vivid in your description of your own emotions. Managing difficult choices and talking to your kids about those choices and decisions you have to make. Considering solutions, thinking out loud, kind of giving it a mental microphone so that kids can listen to your internal thought process as you work through a situation. Maybe you're reading a novel about a dilemma that the characters are having. Think out loud for your students. Pretend to be in that character's head and think out loud so they can hear you modeling decision making. Manage your own frustration. We are really sometimes better at walking the walk than talking the talk with social emotional skills. Kids have to see you manage your frustration in order for them to know what it looks like for them to manage their frustration. So maintaining a calm, respectful, kind demeanor all the time is really critical. The adult roles that are played in social emotional teaching and coaching are not only modeling, but reacting and responding to students in different situations. You get to model how to handle a situation. You also get to teach specific skills. So we're going to talk first about just those warm and supportive relationships that you have with students, those personal greetings, the tone of voice you have, holding space for kids, letting them talk. So, noticing that maybe one of your students is looking a little droopy and inviting them to eat lunch in your room during during their lunch period, or asking if they'd like to talk at their study hall. And then you be quiet while they talk. That's holding space. Showing a genuine interest in kids and asking, how did the play go? Coming to the track meet and being able to talk on Monday about different students and how well they did. Reflecting yourself on different circumstances and asking open-ended questions. So another thing you can do is embed opportunities through your day to have students interact in journal writing, in role play, in discussion, in creative projects that allow them to show you what they are dealing with internally, because that's going to offer opportunities for you to go, you know what? I've noticed a number of students writing in their journal about peer pressure. So that's probably something we should talk more about in class, and I should be giving more examples. So going through your day and thinking, what are the opportunities in my subject that I teach where I could embed some activities that allow kids some social emotional practice. So we're going to talk specifically about a framework that I mentioned is in the book that I wrote called Walk the Wire, an emotional coaching framework for adolescents. It's published by Best Friend Books, and you can find it on Amazon if you're interested in using the book with your students. It's written for students at middle school age level. And the Walk the Wire framework is kind of an acronym, if you will, for the process we're going to teach students to use that is building social emotional competence when they run into different situations. So the wire stands for some specific steps. Each letter in the wire stands for specific steps. And the reason I use the walk the wire analogy is because we have, students are balancing like you do on a tightrope in many circumstances at this age. They are balancing a lot of different things. And oftentimes they are feeling like they are in a dangerous situation emotionally, socially. They're balancing their own interests versus the interests of others. They're balancing their own goals versus the goals or expectations of the group they're in. They're balancing their own values versus the rules and expectations that are being placed upon them. They're balancing their own benefit versus the greater good of the community. They're balancing immediate gratification with greater delayed rewards. Like, I want to go out and hang out with my friends all afternoon, but I'm going to be in really big trouble if I fail math, so I probably should do my homework. And what is the easiest versus what's right. So talking to kids about how this is a balancing act. Social emotional skills are always a balancing act. It's a matter of being able to always balance out what I want and my need for gratification versus what is the benefit of the greater good, and how do I kind of make those two fit together. So the first step in that social emotional framework is the T in the wire. And that is thinking or talking through the issue or the situation you've been given. So that's the skill of being able to know that I'm having an emotion about it, but I can think through the facts of the situation separate from my emotion about it. So I'm angry that the teacher has told me that if I don't get my homework caught up, my missing assignments, I'm going to flunk. Okay. I'm mad about it. Okay. But I can think through the facts of the situation separate from my emotions. I can think about how many assignments am I really missing? How does that impact my grade? Or let's say I'm sad because I didn't get invited to the skating party that all my other friends got invited to. I can recognize that I'm sad about that situation, but I can also think and talk through the issue. Maybe my friend was limited on the number of people she could invite. Her family doesn't have a lot of money. Maybe they had to pay per person to go to the party. I'm probably not as good of friends with her as I am with some other people. And she had to probably prioritize which friends she invited. And I might not invite her if it was my birthday too. We don't always get invited to every single event. So being able to think and talk through a situation separate from the emotions is a really important step in being able to self-manage. And so you can use that example over and over in different situations in your class. The second step is, how do you feel about it? So I do like to encourage kids to think about the facts before they necessarily focus on the feeling, because it's kind of a natural thing for us to focus on our feeling first. But oftentimes when we get carried away by our emotion in the situation first, it's very hard to rein it in and then think through the facts. So I always like to ask kids to think through the facts of the situation first, and then ask, how do I feel about it? So being able to notice and acknowledge your emotions about a situation without letting them overtake you. One of the best strategies you can give someone for managing their emotions is being able to name their emotions, because where you feel your emotions is back here in the emotional center of your brain, but where you label your emotions is up here in more your thinking part of your brain. And so it helps you calm down to actually just label the emotion you're having, because it takes you out of your emotional brain and into your thinking brain. So being able to notice and acknowledge emotions without letting them overtake you is a really big skill to coach kids on. The E in the WIRE framework is to explore additional information or other opinions or perspectives. Explore. So acknowledging that I may have feelings and perspectives or an understanding of the situation that's incomplete. Okay. That is a really mature aspect of a socially, emotionally competent person, is being able to understand that even though I have this strong feeling about it, and even though I've already analyzed what I think the situation is, there may be information I'm missing that might be important to figuring out how to handle it. So who can I ask for another opinion about it or another perspective? How do I seek out information to make sure I'm looking at this right? Because oftentimes we are looking at things from such an isolated perspective that we may not be seeing things the way they really are. So I really like to encourage and help kids explore additional information and opinions. This step of social emotional development can be worked into almost any group activity in any subject area. The importance of asking, do I have all the information I need to make a good decision about this and form an opinion about it? The W in the WIRE is weighing your options. Understanding that there are more than one way to respond to any situation, and that every option has different benefits and different potential problems associated with it. And being able to weigh those options and list out the pros and the cons of different options to respond to a situation. Again, what a great aspect of instruction that you can incorporate into any subject matter, being able to think about different options for action and weighing the options. If you're talking about a historical event, I saw a brilliant lesson going down in a history class not long ago about World War II and about a particular meeting. I can't remember what stage of the war it was in, among leaders from the different countries. And they had divided the class group in class into groups representing different countries, and having them come up with, at this critical juncture in the war, what were all the options that they had for taking action and what would have been the pros and the cons to each of those, and asking each of the groups representing different countries to share those perspectives. Whoa, what a profound academic lesson that can also then be related to our own personal decision-making process. So really talking about the importance of being able to weigh your options. The I stands for imagining the impact that your actions will have on yourself, on others, on the broader world outside your own experience. So being able to imagine, here's my options. I'm going to not only weigh the pros and cons, but I'm going to think several steps down the road about what will happen after I make that decision. And that is a hugely important aspect of social emotional competence, is being able to think beyond the here and now to what is the impact going to be on me, on my friends, on my family, on people I don't even know, on my school, on my community. How do my actions impact myself and others? And that's an important aspect of deciding which option to choose. The next step is the R in the WIRE, which is responding with intention. And that means that now that I have identified what the facts of the situation are, identified how I feel about it, considered all my options and weighed the possible impact of those options, now I can choose a response. I can choose what to do. Responding with intention based on an understanding of the facts of the situation, my feelings about it, any additional information or perspectives other people might have, what the potential impact of the down the road of my decisions are, I can choose the best option. And then the final step, which is just as important as any of the others, which is the E, which is the ability to evaluate how that worked for me. Okay. We know a lot of people who perpetually make the same decisions, and it hasn't worked out so well. Can't you think of 2 or 3 people that you know, adults, who consistently make bad choices and you want to say, how's that working out for you? It's because they haven't done step E, which is to evaluate the outcome of their response and ask, did that really work out the way I intended? Did it make for a better outcome? Should I have done things differently? That's a huge step in social emotional competence, is being able to get to the place where you evaluate the outcome of your decision-making process to see, did it work out the way that I wanted it to, in the best way that it could. So once you've taught those stages of acquisition or of social emotional competence, you have to go through the same stages you would with any academic skill. You have a stage where you teach the skill through direct instruction and guided practice and giving feedback to those students about how well they're demonstrating it. You go through that stage of developing fluency where you give more independent practice and give lots of embedded opportunities to see if they can apply that skill in different situations. And you have regular application of those skills. In stage 3, where you're really asking kids to be able to continue to demonstrate it even when you're not actively giving them opportunities and giving them feedback. They've really incorporated it into their repertoire of skills in their life. And then being able to generalize it to lots of different circumstances, applications in new settings, in new interactions, and in new situations. So that's kind of an overview of an emotional coaching process called Walk the Wire. And again, there is a book that goes with it that explains each of the steps for students. If you choose to use it, you can find it on Amazon to use for yourself in refining your instruction of that social emotional coaching process. And it's available also for purchase digitally on Teachers Pay Teachers if you choose. It's a little more affordable if students want a copy. A lot of students like digital files as well. So it's available either through Teachers Pay Teachers or Amazon. And I hope you find it helpful. And we will talk more in our next session about how we build resilient, socially, emotionally competent kids. Thanks.